Welcome to this explainer. You know, if you think rapid technological change wiping out traditional jobs is just a modern phenomenon, you are in for quite a surprise. We're going to look back at an era that faced its very own massive communications revolution, and we'll see how diplomacy didn't just survive it, but actually reached its absolute zenith.
So let's get right into the core mystery here. How exactly did an aristocratic boys' club face down a tech revolution that promised to make them completely useless, but instead they pivoted to create the modern professional embassy we know today? Coming out of the Napoleonic Wars, the diplomatic service was incredibly small. Just to put that into perspective, in 1870, the entire British service had just 122 men. So how did this tiny, highly traditional group of guys adapt to a rapidly modernizing world?
First up, Upgrade 1, the rules of the game. To really understand how diplomacy adapted, we have to look at the people involved and the frankly chaotic rules they used to play by.
What is so fascinating about these early diplomats is just how elite they were. I mean, the men sent abroad were often fabulously wealthy lords. Over in Austria-Hungary, for example, the foreign ministry actually required young diplomats to be unmarried. Why? Because they believed young men literally couldn't afford wives on top of the extravagant lifestyle required to, cut a dashing figure in high society. Austrian consuls were outright forbidden to marry because of the financial burden. Now, compare that to brilliant, exceptional figures like Madame de Stael. She actually used her loveless arranged marriage to the Swedish ambassador simply to secure a safe haven so she could run her powerful political salon in Paris.
And that brings us to our first major upgrade in 1815. Before this, figuring out who was the most important ambassador in a room was an absolute nightmare. It was entirely based on the perceived power of the monarchs they represented, which was a system dating all the way back to 1504. You can imagine the endless arguments and tension that caused. But at the Congress of Vienna, they finally scrapped this chaotic, insult-ridden system and replaced it with a brilliantly simple modern rule. It was based purely on who arrived in the capital first. The date of official notification of arrival became the sole decider of who outranked who. And just like that, you had a much more harmonious diplomatic corps.
Moving right along to Upgrade 2, putting down permanent roots. Before this shift, an ambassador actually had to go out and rent his own house, which caused massive headaches and put highly sensitive archives at risk every single time they had to move.
Leaving these guys to manage their own property led to some truly absurd disasters. The perfect example is the endlessly jinxed British embassy in Constantinople. They tried building this grand palace in the Para district, but they essentially spent the entire century watching it burn down and trying to rebuild it. It burned to the ground in a huge fire in 1831. They then spent 10 whole years just arguing about where to rebuild the thing. When they finally started construction in 1844, it was damaged by another fire in 1847 and then almost completely gutted by yet another fire in 1870. You just can't make this stuff up.
So governments slowly started to realize, okay, we need to step up and buy or build permanent grand embassy real estate ourselves. A prime example is when the British government bought the magnificent Hôtel de Charros in Paris in 1814. The Duke of Wellington moved straight into this cracking, sinking mansion that was actually originally owned by Napoleon's sister, Pauline Bourget. Throughout the second half of the 19th century, this became the major trend, securing long leases or purchasing permanent, impressive buildings that really grounded the embassy as an unmoving pillar in a foreign capital.
Which brings us to a major plot twist, the telegraph threat. Right in the 1850s, a massive disruption arrived that threatened to destroy the diplomat's entire profession.
You can really feel the existential dread perfectly captured by the Times of London. Following that 1870 fire at the unlucky British embassy in Constantinople, the paper openly wondered if they even needed to rebuild such a pretentious and costly building. They argued that because of the telegraph, governments could just stop paying high salaries to superior minds and instead hire mere marionettes to pass along hourly instructions from headquarters.
But as it turns out, the death of the diplomat was greatly exaggerated. The telegraph had some massive teething problems. First off, it was wildly expensive because they charged by the word. So to save money, messages were brutally pruned, which stripped away absolutely all context and nuance. Plus, enciphered messages were constantly garbled by telegraph operators who had no idea what the text meant. And since those literal wires traveled through foreign territories, they were super vulnerable to being cut, tapped, or copied. All of this proved that you still absolutely needed the human touch of a diplomat on the ground to interpret those raw skeletal instructions coming over the wire. So how do they actually survive?
Well, that brings us to surviving the speed of steam, where diplomats learned to leverage new tech instead of being replaced by it.
You might assume the telegraph made physical couriers totally obsolete, right? Actually, it was the exact opposite. The speed of steam trains and ships supercharged them. Take the introduction of the Orient Express in 1888. By using this train, a messenger could complete a journey from London to Constantinople in just 3 or 4 days, traveling securely in first class. Previously, that same trip would have taken weeks over bumpy, thief-infested roads.
This new physical speed was absolutely crucial for something called the confidential print. This was top-secret, incredibly bulky intelligence that headquarters forwarded to ambassadors. It was way too sensitive to risk sending over a vulnerable telegraph line where foreign operators could just copy it, and far too huge to afford at a per-word rate. Because of that, the brave, resourceful human messenger remained an indispensable part of the whole diplomatic machine, literally carrying the heavy context that the telegraph just couldn't handle. Which leads us right into Upgrade 3, the rise of the professional. Surviving the telegraph just wasn't enough. They had to move away from nepotism and become a structured, credible profession. So they slowly introduced a genuine career track. It started with unpaid attachés basically acting as apprentices, but then they brought in actual examinations, testing language skills in Britain or law in France. Passing those exams meant you could finally become a paid attaché and eventually a second or third secretary. They even started publishing these hefty diplomatic service lists every year, detailing everyone's background, rank, and salary. Diplomacy was finally turning into a regulated profession with a predictable career ladder.
And finally, we have Upgrade 4, Enter the Specialists. Because as the 19th century came to a close, international trade and industrialized warfare were getting way too complex for a traditional diplomat to handle all alone.
To handle that growing complexity, embassies had to bring in specialized talent. Starting right after the Crimean War in the 1850s, we see the rise of the military attaché. These were professional soldiers embedded directly in the embassy to gather technical intelligence on foreign armies. Naval attachés quickly followed, and eventually, as the rivalry for global markets really heated up, embassies had to bring in commercial attachés to fight for international trade concessions, which was huge, especially since a lot of traditional diplomats used to turn their noses up at the smell of trade. The embassy had officially transformed into a multidisciplinary hub.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating final thought to take away from this explainer. We've seen how the 19th century embassy faced down the telegraph, a technology that promised instant global communication, and they didn't just survive, they adapted, professionalized, and thrived. The human touch, the nuanced interpretation, and the secure handling of complex context simply couldn't be digitized back then. But as we watch artificial intelligence and instantaneous digital communication reshape our entire world today, it really begs the question, are we finally facing the technology that will do what the telegraph couldn't, or will the human element of diplomacy prove absolutely essential once again? Thanks so much for joining me on this one, and I'll leave you to ponder that.